The thirst begins. The crash had been sudden. The shaking, the alarms, the violent impact. All of it blurred into fragmented memory as Elena Voss pulled herself from the wreckage of the exploration shuttle. Sparks rained from broken consoles. The air smelled of burning circuits and dust. But worse than all of that was the dry, searing heat that hit her face the moment she stepped outside. The planet, classified as Xerxes 9, was barren. Red gold sand stretched in every direction, broken only by jagged black rock formations under a blazing sun that felt too close, too intense. There was no sign of water, no clouds, and no shade. Elena did a quick head count. All 5 members of the multispecies diplomatic survey team had survived the crash, barely. She moved to help Commander Rilkesh, the towering reptilian from the Arvik species, as he struggled to stand on trembling limbs. Beside him, the shimmering carapace of Ambassador Vethry, an insectoid marin, glistened under the merciless sun. "Status?" Elena asked, her throat already dry. "Emergency supplies destroyed in impact. RASC Unit Delta, the AI interface built into the wrecked shuttle's remains. Rescue vessel en route. Estimated arrival, 32 hours. Elena's heart sank. 32 hours. No water. No shelter. Temperatures already approaching lethal limits. The aliens appeared stunned. On their homeworlds, water was abundant. Ever-present environmental systems recycled and supplied every need. Their technology could manufacture matter from energy, but it couldn't summon water out of thin air without power. And the crash had stripped them of power. "We'll die before rescue," murmured Vethry, mandibles clicking in distress. Her species relied on external hydration. Without moisture, her chitin would crack and collapse. Elena's mind shifted into survival mode. She trained for extreme conditions on Earth, the Atacama, the Sahara, even the Antarctic dry valleys. She knew this feeling, the taste of heat in the air, the invisible enemy of dehydration tightening every breath. "Listen to me," Elena said, standing in the middle of the group. "We have air. We have heat. That means there's moisture somewhere, even if it's only in vapor form." The aliens blinked. Alien eyes, alien minds. To them, survival meant machines. For Elena, survival meant resourcefulness. Without waiting for permission, she began pulling debris from the shuttle. Shattered panels, reflective alloy sheets, broken containment pods. The aliens watched in bewilderment as she laid out materials in a rough circle, digging a shallow pit in the sand. "What are you doing?" Commander Rilkesh rasped, his scaled skin already turning gray from fluid loss. "A solar still," Elena said, not pausing her work. "It's primitive, but it works. The sun heats the air under a clear barrier, vapor condenses on the underside, and collects in the center. Slow, yes, but drops that up." The idea was laughably low-tech to the aliens. Their species had moved beyond such things millennia ago. But none of their devices, none of their wisdom, could help them now. Only practical knowledge of survival mattered. By midday, Elena had crafted the first makeshift still using a curved polymer sheet stretched over a metal basin, weighted with a small stone in the center. The sun did its work. Steam, vapor, invisible but real, began to rise beneath the cover. But the process was agonizingly slow. The first droplet formed only after hours of blistering heat. Elena carefully scraped it into a cracked container. Not even a full teaspoon. She didn't drink it yet. She rationed it, waiting for more. By evening, the situation had worsened. Ambassador Vethry had collapsed, unable to regulate her internal temperature. Another alien, Caliph, a soft-bodied creature from the oceanic world of Luther, began to slur his speech and fall in and out of consciousness. Signs of dehydration shock were already manifesting. Elena's own lips cracked. Her tongue felt like sandpaper. But she kept working, setting up a second still, then a third. Why can't your people just make water?" One of the aliens croaked weakly. "Because you can't cheat physics," Elena murmured through cracked lips. "Even on Earth, in the worst deserts, we learned this. You use what the planet gives you." even if it's only vapor. As night fell, the temperature dropped sharply, but no one had the energy to build a proper shelter. The aliens lay in silence, their great forms shivering and twitching. Only Elena remained awake, blinking at the stars, checking the stills for precious drops. One by one, they had all started to fall. And this was only day one. Collapse of giants. The second sunrise on Xerxes. 9 was worse than the first. Elena Voss woke to the sound of ragged breathing and the eerie stillness of bodies too weak to move. The alien team members, once proud representatives of their species, were crumpled in the dust, their bodies visibly deteriorating. Even the morning air, cooler than the searing midday, felt dry as bone. She checked her makeshift solar stills. 3 of them now. Each had yielded barely a few precious drops overnight. Carefully, she collected the condensation into a salvaged metal cup, hands trembling from her own rising dehydration. "Commander," she called, kneeling by Rilkesh, the reptilian Arvik. His once glossy scales were pale, skin sunken. He opened one golden eye, barely conscious. "Water!" His voice was a rasp of breath and pain. Elena pressed the rim of the cup to his mouth, allowing just 2 drops to fall onto his parched tongue. Not enough to heal. Not enough to help much. But enough to keep him alive for now. The others weren't as lucky. Ambassador Vethri of the Marins was barely breathing. Her exoskeleton was cracked in several places, leaking a milky fluid. The ocean-dwelling Caliph had entered a state of near catatonia, his gelatinous flesh shriveling like an old fruit under the relentless sun. Elena felt the first true spike of fear. They were dying faster than expected. Even she wasn't spared. Every breath burned her throat. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her vision blurred at the edges. But she forced herself to move, to think, to act. She set to work expanding her operation. She tore more panels from the wreckage, constructed crude tripods to suspend reflective surfaces, and used the plastic from emergency sheeting to create additional condensation traps. Every scrap was precious. Every drop mattered. The aliens, in their frailty, watched her with wide, feverish eyes. None of them understood what she was doing or why. "Why this method?" whispered Caliph, his voice barely audible. "Too slow, too primitive." "Because it works," Elena murmured, breath shallow. In the desert, humans survived for tens of thousands of years before technology. We learned to pull moisture from air, from plants, from even the most barren places. It's not fast, but it's the only option. The irony wasn't lost on her. The most advanced species in the galaxy, creatures with technology beyond human comprehension, were helpless here, while the most basic, old-world survival knowledge was the only thing keeping death at bay. The day stretched on. The heat rose. The stills produced slow, precious droplets. Elena rationed ruthlessly, just enough to wet her own cracked lips, then forced herself to tend to the others. She poured half a teaspoon into Ambassador Vethri's mouth. The alien convulsed weakly but swallowed. Another fraction of water for Caliph. Another for Rilkesh. Her hands shook as she worked, but she kept moving. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears, and her vision swam from lack of fluids. 1 foot in front of the other. That's what her survival instructor had taught her long ago. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But always move forward. By late afternoon, Rilkesh's breathing steadied slightly. He looked up at Elena through bloodshot eyes. "Your people endure," he rasped, voice faint but laced with something else, something like awe. Elena nodded weakly. "We have to. Earth wasn't always kind to us." The other aliens, too weak to speak, watched her with the same expression, a growing understanding that their own technological arrogance had blinded them to something fundamental. Survival was not about superiority, it was about adaptation. And humans had adapted through the worst nature could offer. As the twin suns dipped toward the horizon, Elena managed to build a 4th still. Her fingertips were numb. Her body screamed for rest, for water. But she refused to stop. The stills, primitive, ugly, fragile, had become their only chance. And she would not let them fail. That night, As stars unfolded above the cold desert sky, two aliens lay unconscious, barely clinging to life. Elena sat by the flickering emergency beacon, shivering in the freezing wind, and checked the stills one more time. In the metal cups, tiny beads of water glistened in the moonlight. Not much, but enough. Enough to keep hope alive, the human way. Elena Voss woke to her own heartbeat hammering in her ears. Her mouth felt like it was packed with dust. Her skin was raw and burned. When she sat up, every joint screamed in protest. She blinked through blurred vision and forced her mind to focus on one thing: the water stills. She crawled first, knees dragging through the gritty sand. The first still, moisture droplets clung to the underside of the plastic sheet. She checked the second, then the third. Tiny beads of water, painfully slow to gather, but there. Water was life. She scraped the collected droplets into her salvage container, barely enough to fill a single cap. Her throat clenched at the sight. She knew the math. They were all hours away from organ failure. The third day without water, the human limit was approaching. For the aliens, it had come even sooner. She looked at the team. Rilkesh, the Arvik, lay motionless, his scales cracked and ashen. Ambassador Vethry's exoskeleton had split further overnight, leaking fluid that glistened silver under the dawn. Caliph, the soft-bodied aquatic, was so shriveled he was barely recognizable. Elena wiped her forehead with a shaking hand and forced herself up. "You're not dying," she whispered to them. "I won't let you die." Her fingers, cracked and blistered, began working automatically. She scavenged more reflective materials from the wreck, using the curved inner panels of the ruined flight bay. She dug shallow trenches to hold heat and moisture. She shaped the last of the intact plastic into smaller covers. She even stripped wiring insulation to create tiny channels to direct condensed droplets more efficiently. Her mind was running on pure survival instinct. She didn't stop. She couldn't. The alien survivors were too weak to even question her anymore. Only Rilkesh managed to open one eye when she pressed another drop of water to his lips. "Why?" he croaked, voice thin as a breath. Elena swallowed, her own lips split and bleeding. "Because humans don't give up," she rasped. "Not when it matters." She thought of her grandmother, who had taught her how to build a solar still in Arizona when she was 8 years old. "The desert doesn't care who you are," her grandmother had said. "It kills the arrogant first. Respect it, and you survive." Here she was, on another planet entirely, and the lesson still held. By mid-morning, she had 6 working stills. She rotated between them, collecting each fragile bead of moisture into a larger cracked canister. She rationed herself to a single sip, less than a tablespoon. The rest she divided among the aliens. Her hands trembled as she tipped liquid into Calith's soft, shriveled mouth. The alien twitched, his eyes fluttering. Even half dead, he managed to rasp a single word: survive. The sun climbed higher. Heat waves shimmered across the rocky horizon. Sweat no longer came. Their bodies had nothing left to give. Late in the day, the emergency comm unit chirped, a weak transmission at the edge of range. Elena dropped the tool she was holding and crawled to it. "Expedition team, this is Rescue Vessel Celestine." The voice crackled through static. "We're delayed by ion storms. ETA, 14 hours. Elena's heart sank. She closed her eyes. 14 more hours. Too long. Much too long. But instead of despair, something fierce lit inside her. She stood, unsteady, shaking but upright. She checked the stills again. More drops. Not enough to save everyone, but enough to buy time. "Focus," she muttered to herself. "Survive first. Save him second. Move." She gathered shards of transparent hull polymer and started constructing miniature versions of her stills, palm-sized, using heat from any reflective surface she could find. Even the wreck's shattered control panels could be angled to concentrate solar warmth. Hours later, her hands were bloodied, her breath ragged, but she had 10 stills. As the twin suns lowered, casting long shadows over the desert, she managed to rouse Rilkesh enough to drink more. His breathing steadied. "You kept us alive," he whispered. Elena sat back on her heels, blinking through exhaustion. Not alive yet, she said hoarsely. But close. The alien, prideful, superior when they'd first met, looked at her with something unfamiliar in his golden eyes. Respect. Your species, he murmured, is relentless. Elena gave a dry, cracked smile. That's the human way. That night, under a sky blazing with alien stars, the stills continued to drip, one tiny drop at a time. The line between life and death remained razor-thin. But it wasn't over yet. Drops of triumph. The first pale rays of dawn stretched across the barren desert as Elena Voss opened her eyes to the sound of soft breathing, more than one set of lungs. For a heartbeat, she didn't understand. That hit her. They were still alive. Her body ached with a deep, gnawing fatigue she'd never known. Her tongue was thick and dry, but she forced herself upright, biting down on a groan as her joints protested. She scanned the small camp of bodies. Rilkesh still breathed, his chest rising and falling in shallow but steady motion. Vethry's cracked exoskeleton glistened faintly. Elena's ration droplets must have been enough to prevent total collapse. Even Caliph, whose frail, moisture-dependent body had seemed beyond saving, twitched feebly in the sand. They were still here. Elena staggered to the stills. Condensation had gathered overnight. More than yesterday. The cooler temperatures must have allowed for better collection. Carefully, painstakingly, she gathered the precious drops into the battered cup. 5 mouthfuls. Enough to make a difference. Her hands trembled as she moved between the aliens. Rilkesh first, half a teaspoon. Vethry next, careful not to spill on her fragile exoskeleton. Finally Caliph, whose body shuddered as the moisture touched his lips. He stirred weakly, and his glassy eyes fluttered open. Elena's heart swelled with cautious hope. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Just a little longer." The rising suns brought heat, but for the first time, it wasn't despair that filled her chest. It was determination. She built 2 more stills using scraps she'd overlooked in her exhaustion. Every hour brought more droplets. She rationed with brutal care, measuring survival in fractions of sips. Even the smallest intake seemed to slow the alien's decline. Midday came and went. She worked through the dizziness, the numbness, the sharp pangs of thirst. She refused to look at the horizon, refused to let her mind drift to rescue or death. There was only the next still, the next drop, the next breath. Her ancestors had done this in deserts under unforgiving skies. She would do the same here. By late afternoon, a low rumble in the distance broke her trance. She looked up. A ship. At first, she thought it was a mirage. The heat shimmered in the air, distorting the image. But then the sleek silver form of the rescue vessel, Celestine, dropped through the clouds, thrusters kicking up clouds of dust. For a moment, Elena just stood there, numb, stunned, barely able to process it. Then, finally, she let herself exhale. They were saved. The medical team moved fast. The aliens were placed into sealed hydration pods within minutes. Fluids replenished intravenously, their vitals stabilized. The medics moved to Elena next, tried to assist her onto a stretcher, but she waved them off, stubborn even in the final moments. "I'm fine," she croaked, though her body swayed dangerously. She sat on the ramp of the ship as the rescue team worked, a hydration pack finally pressed into her hands. She drank slowly. Too much too fast could kill a dehydrated person, and felt the first cool relief slide down her throat. Her eyes stung as she watched Rilkesh and Vethry recover, their breathing steady. Even Caliph gave a weak flutter of his fragile limbs. One of the alien medics, a species she didn't recognize, approached her. "We have reviewed the preliminary reports," the medic said softly. "Had you not taken action, this team would not have survived." Elena gave a faint, cracked smile. "I just did what I could." The medic tilted his head. "The others want to speak with you. There are discussions already underway. Your survival methods are being archived for future training. It seems your simplicity was superior to our complexity in this case." Elena closed her eyes, breathing deeply. "Sometimes you don't need fancy tech. You just need drops. The medic nodded solemnly. We owe you much, human. Hours later, aboard the Celestine, Rilkesh, now fully conscious, found her sitting by the observation window, watching the stars wheel overhead. You saved us, he said quietly. Elena gave a small shrug. Didn't do it alone. The planet gave me the vapor. I just made it drinkable. Rilkesh's golden eyes regarded her for a long moment. Your species, I underestimated you. She smiled faintly. A lot of people do. Outside the window, Xerxes, 9 shrank into darkness as the ship moved away. But deep inside her, something remained. Not just pride, but a quiet certainty that sometimes, when all else fails, the most basic knowledge, the simplest ideas, and the sheer refusal to quit, can mean the difference between life and death.